Hi, I'm Gabe Lajeunesse, and this is the Abundance Agenda, where we examine policies that help us build more, live better, and leave no one behind. This project is sponsored in part by Acre Development Holdings. Our housing crunch leads many to wonder what they can do to help. The reality is a lot. While we're hopeful about larger development projects, infill, adding new homes to our existing spaces, it's the fastest path towards growth that provides an advantage of freeing up owners' equity that would generally be untapped until they sold or until they passed away. We can see some examples. California passed in 2020 an accessory dwelling unit reform bill, and since that time, nearly 1 in 5 new homes are ADUs. In a city closer to us, Portsmouth, New Hampshire, pretty similar to Montpelier or Barrie with historic downtowns, they've seen a surge in housing through condoization. Back in the 1990s, they had a couple hundred condo units to over 1,200 today. So in our panel discussion today, we have a great panel. We're going to explore how we can adaptively reuse our buildings and how we can subdivide to create some infill that will really help all of us help in this housing challenge that we have. So today I have as guest Robin Freeman. He's a real estate attorney at Earl & Freeman here in Montpelier. We've got Tony Motz, a commercial lender from Community National Bank, and Kevin Casey, a local realtor with Hickok and Boardman. So thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. I thought maybe the best way to dig into this is to look at some scenarios, some things that could be happening. They are happening maybe on a smaller scale, but could be happening on a larger scale. So I'm just going to throw some scenarios out and love to have a little bit of a round table to say, okay, what would this look like? So here's the first one. I'm a homeowner. I want to build an ADU on my property. I might want to rent it. I'm not really sure. I can't figure out how I'm going to pay for it. What are the legal, financial, let's say my home, in terms of values, say it's a $400,000 home. I've had some quotes. It's maybe going to be $150,000 to build this ADU. How do I do that? What does that look like? Maybe we'll start with a lending perspective, because I think that's maybe my first question is, where am I going to get the money for this project I want to do?
Yeah, so my initial thought, if you were a client that I was talking to, would be, what's the equity in the home? The home might be worth $400,000. Is there a first mortgage on it? Is there a balance owed? And we would kind of go from there. Traditional financing, we'd finance 80% of the home's value. So if the home was $400,000 in this case, there could be $320,000 in equity that was available, and we would go from there and talk about what the project detailed, and we would order an appraisal to confirm the value, and based off what the true equity in the home is, we would come up with a plan on how we could finance this for you to build the unit.
Okay, so let's assume, because a lot of this is, we're sitting on a lot of equity, right? So let's assume we bought this home 20 years ago. There is a lot of equity in there. Maybe there's $250,000 or $300,000 in equity. There's some rent. Does that get factored into your calculations, or?
The rent, proposed or projected rental income would be a question that we would ask. That's additional income into whatever else you have for earnings that we would want to calculate for. And as far as an appraisal goes, one of the methods is the home could be worth based on projected income. So those numbers too factor into the true value of the home based off how much income that unit could produce.
Okay, great. So you're going to look at it, and then it would just be whatever traditional mortgage rates are? Like, what would, in today's environment, what would a loan like that cost, percentage-wise?
Hard to say. Probably, we're looking around 7% in that ballpark on a commercial financing. Maybe right in that range for a 20 or possibly a 25-year mortgage.
Okay. All right. And so from a real estate perspective,
sure.
So first of all, we're going to have some sense of what, the market rents are to be able to get to the appraisal and that sort of thing. But is it worth me doing this, Kevin?
Yeah, without doubt. I mean, I think that what you're going to look at is, what I'm seeing for, say, for example, a 2-bedroom, a brand new unit, you're probably looking at $1,800 to $2,000 for that unit or more, depending on the amenities.
That's the rent, you're saying?
For the rent,
okay.
Correct.
Wow.
And as far as like the appeal and the value, I think in today's market, what we tend to find is that homes that have that ADU are in demand because they kind of give that multi-generational opportunity. Even in my own case, where my father-in-law lives with us some of the year to help out with childcare and allows him to, be in retirement and travel and do the things he wants to do, but he also helps us out with the kids. That's huge, and so that demand is there from younger families who do have that need for family, or they might want to rent that out, or do a short-term rentals if they don't want the long-term tenant, but they just want the additional income. So there's a lot of options, and it's a pretty high demand property. Like they're desirable. They sell relatively quickly, and if they're done right, they really do give the homeowner a lot of options.
Will it add value to my home? Like again, this scenario, it's a 400,000. I put another 150 into it. Do you think?
Yeah, I think it does. I think is that there's a few things to kind of always keep in mind, and on when you're dividing the home is I think it's they always say it comes down to kitchens and bathrooms, and I think to some degree that's true. I think if you have your main house and you have 2 bathrooms, you probably want to maintain those 2 bathrooms. I can say that much, rather than just saying, oh well, we'll just give one to the other unit. Try to maintain those 2 because those 2 actually have a big are a big driver in the market. So it will add value, definitely, and it can add value either as a rental property, or as like I said, the higher demand and desirability for that multi-generational living.
Okay, so Robin, you've done a lot of work with me over the years. I come to you. I have this interest in doing this in my own home. Are there legal? So I'm not selling anything in this particular moment, right? I'm just trying to lease things. Yeah. Are there legal ramifications? Should I be talking to an attorney? Should I be calling you, or is this?
Sure. So yeah, I mean there are a few things you need to look at from a legal perspective if you're just doing a straight ADU. You're going to have some permitting that most likely you will have to go through. Depending on the municipality you live in, different towns and cities have more robust zoning than others. So if you're trying to do this in Burlington, there's a very robust regulatory scheme governing ADUs, and you're going to want to check in with the city and make sure you're doing everything that you need to do. In a smaller town without zoning, you're not necessarily going to have much you need to do at the municipal level. Depending on how the ADU is structured, if it really is either a new structure or in any way you're adding a bedroom to the property, you're going to need a state permit as well for wastewater and well water or potable water in some fashion. And that, again, what's involved in that really depends on where you live. If you're on a municipal water and sewer system, the state permit process is pretty simple. Generally speaking, you're going to get a designer to give you an exemption letter, and the city's going to say, "Yep, we've got the capacity for this." File everything, you get your permit back from the state, and it's relatively quick. If you need to potentially upgrade your septic system or your well or something like that, the permitting process may take a little longer. And obviously, if you're upgrading septics or digging a deeper well, the cost is going to be a little greater.
So I'm hearing it sort of depends. So you would prefer clients call you early. That's what I always hear from you. Call me early, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Give me a call or give any real estate attorney a call. We can have a quick conversation with you, kind of talk about what your specific situation is and guide you through the next steps. That can either be with us helping you, or a lot of this, if really what you need is a municipal permit, a lot of times I'll tell you, just talk to the zoning administrator for your town, see what they tell you to do, maybe check back in with me as you're going, but there isn't a lot of work that I necessarily need to do. And then there's the legal ramifications after it's done. So if you're renting this, now you're a landlord. If you've never been a landlord in Vermont before, you really should make sure that that's what you want to do before you start renting property. Vermont is a very tenant-friendly jurisdiction for landlord-tenant law. So you want to familiarize yourself with what you can and can't do and what it really means to be a landlord in Vermont before you start renting out the.
Would you help with a lease if somebody's trying to get
Sure.
a lease?
Yes, if they needed a lease or they needed help with any aspect of renting, I can help with that. Other real estate attorneys, there are landlord-tenant attorneys. The Vermont Apartment Owners Association is very good and has a lot of resources if you want to reach out to them as well. So there's a lot of information and there are a lot of resources out there for landlords. What you don't want to do is just go into it and say, it's fine. I can, go to the law firm of Google and ChatGPT and I'll be good.
Yeah.
So you really do want to talk to somebody that knows what they're talking about so that you set yourself up for the right situation.
Well, good. Well, thanks for that. So that was one scenario. I will say this is the one, I think this is the place where most people probably are starting, is this thought, right? I mean, we had talked before we came in, this situation, you had built one on your property, you elevated a garage, you got an office. I think a lot of people look at their existing space and they're just trying to figure out, does the math work? Does this make sense? Is it going to be worth it? Am I going to be comfortable with somebody living here? Again, if it's family, then maybe that's good or bad, right? Like there's different components to that. It sounds great for many people to have that multi-generational situation. But I think when you look at that California, the sort of watershed that's happened, we've got now 5 years of history, but it just has to do with people seeing a new neighbor that moved in around the corner and they're like, oh, they live in that apartment they built above the garage and they're really great people and we really like them, right? And then it just becomes, and now all of a sudden, if you guys, I don't know how much you're into this stuff, but if you ever want to look at like tiny homes and ADU production, California is the place. All the factories and stuff are in California because it's been normalized in the communities, right? That it's like 1 in 5 new homes. That's a lot of homes, right? And so it's like, okay, now it's been normalized. There's a demand, and so we kind of. I don't know how much are you guys getting these kind of questions? Is this a real thing that you're seeing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
I get questions about tiny homes too, not even necessarily ADUs. Just somebody says, hey, I'd like to put a tiny home on this land. What do I need to do? And
I would say that one of the things is that I think there's a tremendous amount of interest to do it. I think one of the bottlenecks that we run into is finding a contractor. I think that is one of the main bottlenecks right now, is that when you look at builders who are available and you're looking at long lead times, kind of what I would tell people and what I usually tell people is, kind of look at your network and find people who might know an architect, a designer, somebody who can kind of help vision the process. Because I think one of the challenges is I think particularly for folks who might be older and have lived in their house for a really long time, they only see their space as one thing, right? And sometimes it takes those fresh set of eyes in there to help them reimagine the space and rethink the space. So one of the things that I would recommend to people is when they're starting this process is, in addition to talking to their attorney and talking to their bank, is also just reaching out and getting a consultation from, a local architect, a designer, even reaching out to like Norwich Architecture School to see if they have any interest or they know anybody who might be interested in just visioning. I think that can be a critical part, because putting all those pieces in place ahead of time will make the project go much easier. So that would be my one recommendation, and then reach out to your local realtor, banker, or lawyer to say, like, do you guys know any contractors?
No.
That's one of the drivers.
It's a really key point. So thanks for raising that, Kevin. I mean, it's a good segue into scenario 2 as well. I think that what people are finding. So we have workforce issues, as we talk about in this program. How do you do that? And a lot of the solutions are some of these modular solutions, right? Like, okay, I can find a contractor, but they don't have capacity to do X, Y, and Z, but maybe I can bring in some kind of modular solution and they can finish it off for me the way that I want. But the other thing that we're finding is that people get into this and they realize that, okay, that 300 square foot like addition to the garage or whatever it is, it's not really what they want. What they really want is they want to downsize, right? They want to get into a smaller space. So scenario 2 is they've gone down this road of discovery and they realize, actually, I want the ADU. I want the small, I want to downsize. I want single level living. I've got the room on my lot to be able to build this. So now we have a situation where instead of renting this, they want to build this other smaller place, one level living, but they want to condoize. They want to sell their other house, right? And so we haven't seen a lot of that here, but certainly in other places, I mentioned Portsmouth, New Hampshire, there's plenty of places where condoization has been a path to creating new homes. And so maybe, Kevin, I'll just start with you.
Sure.
Like, what's the market for something like that? So I have the same, scenario. I still have that 3-bedroom, 2-bath home that's still sitting there, but now there's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, but really nice, like not the 300 square foot. It's a 750. It's a really nice place that we built, and maybe I put a bunch of money into it too, right?
Yes.
It's not the 150 anymore, but how much could I get? Does that devalue that house as a condo?
No. I think one of the things I think, and I think it would. Let me start that over. Is that it really depends on your market. There's certain markets are more comfortable with condos than others. Historically, Montpelier was always one where residential condos outside of the complexes were less desirable. That's changed over the years, over the last, say, 5 or 6 years, and we've seen more and more condos out of the old Victorians. You see them up on College Street. You see some down in the Meadow. So they're out there. I think that that idea of downsizing to the single level living is another one that I think is where having the architect in early is also important, because I think one of the challenges is with people who have been in their homes for a really long time is trouble visioning, but also actually downsizing, right? So it is I've seen it happen where the idea of building this 1 or 2 bedroom ADU, they start to have the questions of like, well, where am I going to put my dining room table? Where am I going to put my couches? Where am I going to put all my furniture? And at that point, you're no longer downsizing; you're just moving.
Right.
And so it's really having those hard conversations.
There might need to be some family intervention.
Some family intervention, absolutely. But I think that when it comes down to the whether or not it devalues the property, again, I don't think so. I think it's one where, if it's a detached unit, I think you're probably less likely to do a condo as you are a subdivision and sell the main house. Would probably be from a real estate standpoint, would probably be your best bet, because you get the highest return, rather than condoizing it and having a 3-bedroom house and a 1-bedroom ADU, make it a 2-bedroom always. But that would depending on the situation. But again, it's call an agent, call an attorney, and call a designer just to come in and just to have the conversations. Like, this is what we do every day, and I actually love it. Like, I love going in and helping people and kind of giving them some vision, giving them some ideas, and then kind of hooking them up with some people to continue those conversations.
So however the structure looks, though, I'm just hearing, hey, if that was a $400,000 house before, and then you do this other thing, it's probably still a $400,000 house, right? Not the fact
No,
that
having that additional unit increases the value of the property, for sure.
Yeah.
It depends on how it's used and how it's presented.
Yeah.
Right.
So from a banking perspective, I come in, and again, this is going to be a bigger it's not the $150,000 project. Maybe it's a $300,000 project, but it's now going to be my primary residence, and I'm going to have this other home that I have all this equity in, right? How does the bank look at that? Is it really any different?
It would be slightly different than scenario one. In this example, the homeowner wants to essentially relocate into one of the condos and then sell the unit or the residence that they're living in now. So we would be talking about a not attached new build, so they could subdivide and then sell the primary residence. We would look at this as a like construction financing, in which we would do 80% of the value. In this example, we would do what's called an as-complete appraisal. So even though there might just be raw land, the borrower would have already gone and talked to an architect and had their design plans in place, and the appraiser would look at those and take into consideration that this building, based off the plans that you've given me, will be worth this amount once the project is completed, and we would lend off that amount.
The actual value, even though I'm not gonna sell it, but that's the true value. Maybe I put 300 into it, but they say, oh, this would go for 4 or 450. You're gonna lend off of the 4 or 450.
Yes.
If that's what they say.
Yep. Correct.
Yeah, really great. So again, a little bit more complicated, Robin, but
Yeah.
let's stick with the condo, because I have a separate, we'll
Sure.
kind of talk about subdivision after, but like from a condo perspective, what's the legal like tricks that we need to be concerned about?
So, as in just about anything related to the law, more complicated equals more time and more money. So, when you're talking about condoizing, if you're condoizing either the parcel itself, you're creating the ADU and you've got the primary house and now you've just got 2 units, or you're even converting the house into more than that 1 unit, you've got some additional work to do. In that circumstance, all of the permitting that I talked about before still applies, but you've got some additional permitting. You're almost certainly going to need a state permit in that circumstance. And in addition, the condo documents have to be drafted by somebody. And you definitely want to start involving an attorney in that. You do not want to go to the internet to get your condo documents. So
Because there will be, even in the most separated, there's still some common something
Right.
somewhere, right?
That's how a condo works, is there are individual units that are owned by people, and then there are some common areas that are owned either, without going too far into the weeds, either by the association or by the owners themselves. So there are, everybody's familiar with homeowners association and condo board. So even in a small condo, a condo of 2 units, you still have to have a board that's going to govern how that condo runs, how the common expenses get paid, things of that nature. So you need the governing documents to put that in place. And that can take a little more money and is going to take a little time. That can be done in conjunction with everything else you're doing. But the main thing that I would tell people is, before you just kind of jump in, talk to the realtor, talk to your bank, talk to an attorney, talk to a builder, talk to all of these people, and get a sense, talk to the city about what you might need to do, and get a sense of what your options are before you decide which path you want to go down.
Yeah.
Because it can, financially speaking, it can be a real boon to you to do something like this,
Yeah.
but you want to make sure you know what you're jumping into, because there's a lot more lead time to doing this than just kind of even building a small ADU.
And one thing I would add too is that I think, and Robin can speak to this as well, especially in small associations where you only have 2 units, it's really critical from a future sales perspective is to have a really good set of condo docs and a really good outline of what the common expenses are, how they're paid, and having good reserves. Because I think if you don't, you have these situations where you might have this really nice duplex that's a condo, but it's very much and I'm sure you've come across this, particularly in town here, where it's very much like, well, they've gotten along over all the years, and so this is just how it goes, and when we need to make a decision, we'll make a decision. And that may be fine for the 2 people that have lived there for the last 20 years, but that won't always be the case. And
It's always generation 2.
it's always generation 2,
It's where
exactly.
problems crop up.
Yeah, and 100%. And that's why, anytime there's those associations, I kind of always tell people, it's just like, you know what, go through the pain early because of getting all this sussed out. Have good reserves. Like, as much as it's like, well, I'm just putting money into an account, have those reserves, because it'll come back in the future when you go to do a resale. Attorneys will love it, and banks will love it when they can see that everything's in order, rather than just kind of a handshake agreements.
This is where the law's working on our side, right? We've got
Yeah.
very clear terms that are
Yeah,
everybody
You
can
want
understand.
everything to be as clear as possible. And there's more, I mean, Kevin, you probably deal with this more than I would. But when you're doing something like this, there's the added psychological piece that you need to consider is when you condoize, you're selling a piece of this house or some of this house to somebody else. There's no longer your house, and
Right.
there's somebody else who's going to have a say in the way that this property is now run and managed. So you need to start preparing yourself for that before you say, well, I always did it this way. And
Yeah.
you have to realize it's not just you making the decision anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, so from this scenario 3 that I had sent you guys was more of not just a duplex. Now we've got a multi-family scenario, which is a lot of opportunities for that in central Vermont, a lot of these really big homes. So again, the scenario was a 3,500 square foot home, say on Liberty Street in Montpelier. Somebody, again, a couple older, they own their home, they want to downsize. They like where they're at, they want to stay in place, but they don't need all these bedrooms. So they have a contractor come in, architect that comes in and says, yeah, we could turn this into 3 2-bedroom apartments. You can stay on the ground level, but we could have, these other units up above and add the kitchens and the bathrooms that are requisite for that. So again, from a valuation standpoint, I said, okay, let's assume that it's a 650 valuation today, but now they're going to have to add the bathrooms and the different entryways and the fire and all the stuff that you have to comply with. Another couple $100,000. Is that going to be a good deal for? Is it going to be worth it? Are they going to recoup their money by doing that?
Oh, definitely. I think that when you look at, say, for example, a 2-bedroom, brand new 2-bedroom condo. Let's say that's sold in the 400s, right? And that's being conservative, depending on the amenities and the situation. If you had, your total building value of pre-conversion was 650, and you're at, 4.25 per unit, or somewhere in that range between 4.25. And then as it goes up, it might go down, but you're, well over $1 million at that point. And then subtract out whatever your construction costs were, you're still coming out ahead.
Yeah, so they could be pulling out a lot of equity out of their home.
Correct, and still maintain
a residence.
Maintain a residence in a unit. But like Robin said, it's no longer your house. You're now
Right.
you're a co-owner.
Co-owner, yeah. So is this any different? It's more like a renovation type loan? I mean, how does the bank look at that?
Similar to construction, renovation, we look at it the same way as brand new construction. What's the equity, what's the value of the building when the project's complete, and we would lend against that.
So you get to this, you have the appraisal, and I guess to a similar $1.3 million valuation, and you still would loan. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer, right? And there's plenty of cash in that deal
Right.
to loan a couple $100,000. Yeah.
I think in this situation, other things to consider: are they going to be a landlord and rent those units, or are they going to turn this into a condo? It's hard to answer that. I think every borrower's situation is different. Does the borrower want to be a landlord? Do they have the time and the interest in managing the property and having tenants, or is it more advantageous to be a co-owner and turn it into a condo? So there's always other considerations, and it can be very specific to.
But the lending really
borrowers.
wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
It would just be based on the value.
Yes.
So that's where it gets into. I don't know if do lawyers, are you like a therapist? Do you coach on this kind of stuff? I mean, so
Well,
somebody comes
yeah.
and they're like, oh, well, this is our plan. And you're like, okay, but realize you don't own, now you
Yeah.
have other co-owners, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do what we can. We certainly will walk them through the legal issues, and those of us who deal with not only development but also provide counseling and support to condo boards and organizations of that nature, we deal with the other side of it too. So we have the benefit of being able to say, now, as you go through this and on the other end, these are some of the things that I see happen and some of the problems that people run into. So either prepare yourself for that, or here's what we can do to try to minimize that, those types of things. So there's a little bit of a counseling involved, but for the most part, I try to limit myself to the legal side of things.
Yeah.
If you've got a situation like this where you're chopping up a house into several different units, a lot of the requirements for condoizing are going to be the same as the last scenario. It may get a little more complicated just depending upon what kind of drawings or plats and plans and things that we need to do to meet the statute. There are some for smaller condo developments, unit sizes of less than a handful, then a lot of the more rigorous requirements kind of go away from the statute. So it's really important to bring in an attorney, especially in a situation like this, very early, so that you know what the legal ramifications are going to be of what you're actually planning to do. And sometimes it can just be, hey, that sounds like a really great plan, but if you had one fewer unit, we could eliminate this, and this
yeah,
requirement.
right.
And
Yeah.
in that circumstance, not only is it going to potentially save you some headache, but it might actually speed up the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there advantage? So let's say, I think a couple of people have mentioned this idea of, rent versus sell. If I think, hey, I'm maybe going to rent this to start out, but I might want to sell down the road, is there an advantage to doing the condo documents while I'm doing all the construction, or is it like, oh, just get to me whenever you decide you want to sell?
So once you have the plan in place and you know what it is you're going to be doing, especially once hammers start hitting nails, so it's pretty much set in stone at that point, you can start doing the condo documents at any point.
Even if I'm going to rent it?
Sure, even if you're going to rent it. What condoizing it allows you to do is have that flexibility later on to say, I don't want to rent these anymore. I'd like to sell them.
Yeah.
And that the work's already done at that point. You can more easily sell them. If you just convert it into apartments, but you don't condoize it, at that point, if you get to the point where you start wanting to sell units, now you've got to go through all of the condo process that you would have had to go through before. Now you've got to do it while you're still living there, while you're now renting, even though you don't want to rent anymore. You're tired of being a landlord. You don't want to deal with the midnight phone calls and my faucet's leaking, all those kinds of things. And now you're waiting and waiting and waiting. The other potential issue that comes up with that in that situation is that, again, depending on the type of project you do, we may need as-built plats and plans and drawings and schematics of the building. That's a lot easier to do if you do it at the time that you're doing all of the construction. If you're doing it years later, you might have to piece that together or get in touch with the builder and try to figure out if you can get those, because there are specific requirements that they need. So it's not just a drawing. So again,
Either way, the answer is call Robin. That's what I hear, right? Like just call Robin and ask early on.
yeah,
Right?
just get your attorney involved and let them know, and hopefully you can avoid some of these pitfalls as you're going along.
Thanks for that. The final scenario, I don't think there's a much, although certainly if you hear something, let me know. I don't think there's as much of a banking angle on this, but let's say I've looked at all this and I'm like, you know what? This is all really cool, but I actually don't want to deal with the headache of this. Why don't I've got a double lot. Why don't we just subdivide the lot and I'll just sell that for, I don't know, what's a building lot go for in Montpelier and Barrie? Like town water, town sewer?
Yeah, so I think it's two different scenarios for sure, between Montpelier, Barrie, or some of the other like surrounding towns that are more rural. But on city sewer and water, I think it's the market kind of fluctuates depending on what's happening with within the market. So like right now, I think that you could anticipate a lot ready to build in Montpelier between 85 and 105, roughly, for a lot that's ready to go. It's kind of where we've seen the lots sell for. But it really depends on where you are in town. How far from downtown, if you're in the floodplain, if you are, how ready, if you're on city sewer and water, because there are parts of town, and say for example Montpelier, that are not on city sewer and water, and then that involves a new septic system. So it's going to be a lower price. So that being said, is that one of the things, we don't see a ton of new building in Montpelier. So lots tend to sit longer on the market. But I think that you're probably looking if you're realistic, anywhere between, like I said, $85,000 and $100,000 per building lot on city sewer and water. If you're in Barry, I think you're looking at a lower price. And again, depending on the neighborhood, it's very neighborhood dependent. And again, those same factors, floodplain and buildability. Does it have ledge? Does it have what's the amenity of the property? So in Barry, you might see lots, buildable lots. I have one for sale that's 60,000, but they can range in price. Sales that have gone from 45 to 90,000.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's just another way to potentially get some equity out and create some space for some other people to live.
absolutely.
I know it's probably more of a civil engineer and surveyor kind of issue, but there still are some legal components to that. So again, if I were coming to you, Robin, and said, hey, we looked at this and I don't want to build the ADU, I do want to just subdivide this lot.
Yep.
What are some things that you would consider as an attorney?
So the first thing, anytime you do a subdivision, you need a survey now. A lot of people don't realize that, but that law changed a few years ago, so you do actually need a survey. Even if it seems like you're just doing a small subdivision, why should you? And again, as I mentioned earlier, depending on what municipality you're in, you may need a municipal permit, so always make sure you check with your town or city. In addition to that, if we're talking about unimproved lots, you may or may not need a state permit. Some of that may depend on how buildable do you want this lot to be when you sell it. If you want it completely buildable, ready to go, slap a house on it because it's got wastewater and water system either in place or the plans in place, then you may need a state permit for that. So again, it's another situation where just give whatever real estate attorney, whoever you trust and work with, a call, say this is what I want to do. We'll run down kind of a checklist for you. These are the things you want to think about. If you want referrals or you want some references from us for different professionals, we're happy to give them. But we just want to make sure that you're doing what you need to do as you roll through the process. And it's a lot easier to say, give me a call every few weeks or so and say, hey, this is what happened. Any pointers or anything you want to tell me in, and I can say, nope, you sound like you're doing a good job. Keep going. It's a lot easier to do that than to wait until the end and you send me everything and I say, well, this is wrong, we need to fix this.
Yeah, you think you're getting ready to, hey, Robin, I have my closing next week, and you're like, oh, no, you have an underground tank. Like, you can't close next week.
The other thing I would say too on that one too is if you are looking to do some sort of subdivision, reach out to some of our local surveyors sooner rather than later. They have a pretty long lead time. It's a lot of work to do a survey, and they are not inexpensive. So I think prepare people for that. Depending on the size of the lot, it can be, it's going to be a few $1,000s no matter what you do, but it could be many thousands of dollars if it's a large piece of land that you're looking at. So it's just being prepared for that. It's not just sketch up a drawing and call it good. They will come out and place pins and do the things that need to be done. And parcel lines are not surveys. No matter what people say, parcel lines are not surveys. So when you see those at the town is not responsible for surveys. That's the homeowner's responsibility. And it's always a good idea to have a survey. It cuts down on a lot of issues. But in this instance, I would give yourself a few months to 2 to 4 months to get a survey done, maybe longer, depending on the time of the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you decide, like in the spring, that you want to have a survey done, plan on the fall.
Right.
But now, this time of the year would be a good time to call your surveyors.
Yeah, I just appreciate all this feedback. I think, as we, think about this housing crisis and what we can do, I think, several key takeaways that I have after having this panel is it's going to take some time. There's going to be a lot of considerations. One answer is not going to be right for everybody.
Nope.
You got to bring the right team on board, but that we can together. We can subdivide. We can create ADUs. We can create additional units of housing. We can create that perfect space to downsize. We can get some equity out of what we already own and be able to use that now to benefit our families and the people that we care about in our lives. So I just really appreciate you all being in here. Again, I think
Anytime.
it's like, you got to get that, that snowball rolling, and it'll start picking up speed. But the more of it that we do, the more people, again, I just feel like they're going to see those neighbors, and they're going to be like, oh, this is great, and then we'll have our own little cottage industry of tiny homes, right? We'll have our own demand that'll be met. So again, just thank you so much to my panel. So I've got Robin Freeman, real estate attorney, Tony Motz, commercial lender from Community National Bank, and Kevin Casey with Hickok and Boardman. Thank you for being on the Abundance Agenda. It's Gabe Lodge and us. Thanks.